such malwares have innovated in every manner. They have found many innovative ways to evade, invade, and infect. In these 60 minutes, we will discuss the techniques of threat actors, the content of such malwares, and state-sponsored actors, and also touch upon how investigators bust the bubble of such actors to save the day. Today, we have with us Shyam Sundar Ramaswami, who is a two-time TEDx speaker who focuses on malware and memory forensics. Shyam is a senior research scientist with Cisco's Security Business Group. He has delivered talks in several conferences and universities like Black Hat, Las Vegas, Stanford University Cybersecurity Program, Quebec Forensics, Serbia, NICON 2020 Goa, Cisco Live Barcelona, and in several IEEE forums in India. Shyam's interviews have been published in ZNet and CISO magazine. Shyam has also taught classes on advanced malware attack and defenses in the Stanford University Cybersecurity Program and runs a mentoring program called Being Robin, where he mentors students all over the globe on cybersecurity. I extend a warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi, for the wonderful introduction.
Looking forward to have an insightful session ahead. Now, I request you to take over.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope my voice is clear, and I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a double confirmation for those two, then we're good. So you can see my screen. Can you see my screen here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We can see you, sir.
Okay, perfect. And my voice is also clear, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for taking time off from your busy schedules. I know we are all in tough times right now, so stay safe and be very careful. Don't venture out anywhere unless it's absolutely necessary. So I'm going to take you through a journey of an interesting journey, to be honest, for the next 45 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A and stuff. I'll try to show you some live stuff also. But yeah, welcome to the talk. Malware investigators and investigations. Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, and a Spy. Now, why did I put this Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, and a Spy? Is because these malwares are basically built for different purpose. Okay. A person who basically writes this malware or builds this malware is basically a malware or a threat actor is what I probably call them. Okay. So when we do this investigation, we find out if he's actually a tinker or a tailor or a soldier. Why a soldier is because most of the malwares that are actually returned today are sponsored by countries. They call it state sponsored or nation sponsored threat actors. Or a spy is probably, steal your data and do a bunch of dirty stuff. So we don't know who these malware actors are. Are they tinkers? Are they tailors? Are they soldiers? Or are they spies? It's actually a book. So there's a movie also on that. This Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, and Spy. Cool. So that's me. I'm like a huge fan of Batman and Avengers. That's the real Batmobiles that you see in the picture, and those are the real Iron Man suits that were built for the movies. I'm a crazy fan. I've traveled all the way from India to Los Angeles to see all these things. So I'm like a huge fan. So that's me. And I teach at Stanford. I've taught classes in Stanford University cybersecurity program. I'm 2 times direct speaker. I'm writing a book. It's probably going to come out in September, I guess. So that process is also ready. So that's me. Awesome. So let's get straight to business. Okay, know more about me. Now, what causes this? I mean, this is pretty simple, right? I mean, if you have a Windows 7 PC, many of us actually use Windows 7 PC, and we all know it's out of support. Technically, it's actually called as end of life. So there's no support from Windows. What's the big deal about, right? You're not going to support me. So what? I'm using a pirated version of Windows on my computer, and I'm happily using it. I don't lose out anything, right? What does this cost? Now, this is pretty serious matter. This is the biggest entry point for these malware or threat actors. Now, when you have an out of life Windows, end of life, to be honest, sorry, end of life or end of support for Windows, they don't release any patches. You don't get any updates. It's got a lot of holes or loopholes in it. Okay. Let's take a very simple example. You have a lock. Everybody knows about this Naftal locks, right? Locks with a key. Naftal is actually a big brand. Godrej Naftal is a brand by itself. Now, there's a particular version of Godrej Naftal locks which they don't manufacture anymore. They say we don't support this anymore because it has a flaw that when you pull it two times in a certain degree of angle, the lock opens by itself. Now, this is a big issue, right? They say that we are not supporting this anymore. Please discard it. We are not using it anymore. And if still some banks or jewelry shops or somebody uses it, they are at a huge risk. Now you pull it, you open it, you get inside the shop and do it. That's exactly what happens with this end of life support also. Okay. Now there are a lot of flaws that we know, that we don't know, that has not been fixed, that have been fixed, but you have not patched it. You will end up getting compromised. Now this is what happens usually in hospitals. Okay. If you see hospitals, for that record, lot of hospitals across the world still run pirated versions of Windows or genuine Windows but end of support Windows. Now what's the big deal with hospitals? Because hospitals ecosystem is controlled centrally, and a receptionist or the billing section has the access to the entire network. Okay, you can see patient records, patient details. Now what if they have an outdated version of this and this data is at a huge risk? That's why you see a lot of ransomware attacks happens in the hospital and the data is actually taken as a hostage. So you have to pay ransom to get it back. Now, what are the things that get stolen in this? Usually what gets stolen in this is basically medical records. In India, medical records is not a big deal now, but in the US, in the Europe, it's a big deal, to be honest. Now, what does it do? It has your name, it has your number, it has your credit card or your policy details, it has your social security number, and a ton of things. Now, what can you do with these things? You will know the age bracket, who's earning what, and who's below poverty line, who are orphans or who do not have a family, and so on. Now, what could an attacker or a malware actor or a threat actor do with this data? Well, this can actually lead to organ harvesting. Okay, so I've actually not worked on that case such, but I've given some advices for some of the incidents that actually happened in Barcelona, where we figured out that a lot of hospitals lost their ransom data due to ransomware. The Interpol shared the information when I was visiting there for some other purpose. We had a discussion with them, and we figured out that they were targeting people who were actually orphans and they have insurance policies. So they either brainwashed them to give away their organs for a price, or some of the people were actually, forced to give away their organs. This is because of the data loss or data theft that actually happened because of a simple out of date Windows. Now, this is the landscape and the world we are living in. Okay. Now, this is the problem that we are into. Now, since we know how the landscape probably works, this is another way of getting into your computer. Now, one way to get into your computer is probably send you an email or make you click on something, or scan the entire hospital network for a weak spot, or bypass this Windows and get inside it. Okay. The next interesting thing is to blackmail you. Okay. This is actually called as a pawn blackmail email. That's pretty famous now. You get an email saying that we know that this is your history and you've been watching porn for a while. I have the screenshots of whatever you're doing. And then they ask you to pay via Bitcoins. Okay. They ask you to, pay via Bitcoins. Now, what actually happens in this case is they make you click on something so that you click on or download something so that they get access to your computer. Okay. Now, this is the pawn blackmail. The first one was a hospital, a case where they got into your network. The second is this pawn blackmail email. Now, what is this all for? all of this is actually for just a click of a button. Okay, all of this is just a click of your button. Now, any malware, right, any cybercrime cannot happen on its own. Okay, if you take a simple Python program, right, a Python program has to be run saying Python, the program, like whatever the program name, and then you run it, right? Or if you run a C++, you have to compile the code and run it. No program or no programming language or a file can run on its own. You need to click on it, right? So that is why they take these kind of tricks, or they take these kind of social engineering methodologies to get into your network and make you click on something so that they can drop malware. Now, this is the first phase, and this is the entry point. Email accounts to 60 to 70% of malware droppers. They have very convincing email and they make you click on these things. Okay. Now, before we go into the deeper sections, what actually happens with a cyber attack? If you guys follow Money Heist, there's a professor behind it, right? I mean, and there are several people who are good with arms, who are good with pickpockets, who are good with locks, weapons, bombs. Everybody's there in a Money Heist series. I think you would have watched Money Heist. Now, there's somebody called as a professor. He's the brainchild behind everything. He's extremely smart. He knows what is what, where comes what will happen next. That's what a cyber attacker also, or a threat actor, or a malware writer does. He knows what the opponent will monitor, he knows what to look for, and he knows how to evade or escape. Now we are dealing with somebody as professor in this whole talk, and you have to be twice smart as the professor to beat him at their own game. Now this is what happens with a cyber attack. They have a plan, they have a motive, and they have the tools and the tricks to outrun you in this whole equation. Okay. Okay, cool. That's good. Now, what exactly is a malware? According to me, a malware is very, very simple. It's just a piece of program, or it's just a piece of code which does a particular task. If you write a printf if you write just a print in Python, it's going to print hello world, right? That's exactly is malware. If you instruct it to do something, it takes an input and gives you an output. Okay. Now the input is basically your computer. That is, your computer that you clicked on something or you downloaded something, and probably the output is your data, your passwords, your file is basically given back to the attacker. That's the difference between this malware and an actual program. There's not much of a difference. It is intended to do a task, and it does once you run it. So you are the one that you're actually activating the whole thing. I think the beep is not some sort of a Morse code. The beep is when people join and they mute and unmute it. So I know it's pretty hard, but I'm also concentrating very hard not to concentrate on the beep. So I wish the beep was actually a Morse code. So the next one. Okay. Now, what exactly the malware does? The malware can actually do plenty of interesting stuff on a computer. Okay. We will see some live malware, some really good examples. I will show you a demo. I have a lot of interesting things, how to perform forensics, what to do, and all those things in the coming slides. But before we probably play with the whole thing, we need to understand how can a malware enter a computer. It can enter via an email. Okay. It can enter when you shop in some website which is compromised, when you're not supposed to watch something like not porn, but when you're downloading stuff like free Netflix shows through Torrent or anything. Sometimes even some people watch porn, they get these malwares from porn sites. And then download free MP3 cutter, free crack for Office 365, free Grammarly app, and anything, whatever it is. And then when you download some documents from somewhere, if you have a gift that says you won a lottery and you click on it, still people fall for you've won a lottery things. This is how a malware can enter your computer. Now this whole picture, right, that you see here is actually called as a threat landscape. The more you are connected to a lot of things, the more you are prone to get attacked. That's basically a threat landscape. And this landscape is, expanded multifold in this pandemic space because of a lot of work from home and everybody's connecting to the internet from home and a lot of other things. Now, how fast can actually a malware execute? It just can run like with a blink of your eye. Okay. A malware executes extremely fast. By the time you just look at something and then do like this, the malware basically runs super fast. It is. Okay. Now, how do we solve this problem? Okay. Now, since it runs with the blink of an eye, it's very hard for us to, analyze the malware. So, one way to probably, do this analysis of a malware is to put it in an environment called as a sandbox. Okay. Sandbox is nothing but an environment which is not connected to the internet and is basically isolated. Okay, that's the way that you run a malware. I'm going to show you those things, but before first, I'll probably want to show you how appealing and interesting a malware looks. It does not even look like a malware, but what sort of dirty tasks it can do is what probably I'm going to show you. Now take this document. Okay, now this document is actually a normal formula that's here. If you use Word, there's something called as Microsoft there's no CTF challenge for Morse code. Unfortunately, not. I would love to play CTF. The agent Tesla is actually a very interesting malware. Now, what you see on the screen here is actually a formula. If you observe closely, it's actually a formula that actually sits on your Word document. And there's something called as equation editor in Microsoft. If you observe in Microsoft, there's something called as equation editor. It'll be on the right side of your toolbar, where you can insert equations and play around with it. Unfortunately, this is what I'm actually talking about, right? In Microsoft, I think Windows 7, I told you, right? It's expired and all those things. Windows 7 has a vulnerability, okay, that they fixed, but if you have an older version, you'll probably be stuck there. It had a buffer overflow vulnerability, okay, in this equation editor. If you're using this equation editor, then you're prone to do a buffer overflow attack on the document. What is buffer overflow? Well, anything you have a bag that can actually fit only 10 apples. If you fit 15 apples, it's probably going to fall down. Even if it's 11, it's going to probably fall down. So they will tell, sir, this is one bag, you can fit only 11 apples, please don't put more than that. So that's basically a buffer overflow. Here, similarly, in a computer terminology, buffer overflow is actually nothing but if it overflows, an attacker can probably exactly the whatever you see there, right? The attacker can actually know or move to the next address so that he can predict the next address. So in the memory, an attacker what he can do is, if he has a buffer overflow, he can change the pointer to a memory location where the attacker's malicious code lies. So that instead of executing a normal code, the attacker can execute the malicious code. Okay, that's a simple buffer overflow. But if I put in a very colloquial term, when a buffer overflow occurs, your machine can get compromised, and that can open the doors to the attacker. Okay, it can crash your machine, it can do a bunch of stuff. And in this case, Agent Tesla, a buffer overflow aided in opening a backdoor. Now I ran this Word document. Now what I did was I opened this Word document, okay, and there were running macros. Macros, nothing but when you open a box, you'll have some balloons flying out. Now each time when you want to open the box, the balloon has to fly out. How do you do it? Use a macro. Macro is a set of instructions when you on opening a doc or auto opening a document, it executes. Similarly, whenever you open this Word document, this formula is probably going to execute. Okay, and that's because of this equation editor. Bummer, unfortunately, that equation editor has a overflow attack. Okay, now that opened a back door. Do you see when I was running this malware, the process says that EQ EDT32 is basically Microsoft's equation editor. Sorry, Microsoft equation editor is actually called. Okay, now it's being called, and when it's being called, it's exploited, and it opens the door to the attacker to put a exe file. So do you know the flow? You got an email which contained a Word document, you opened it, and that email said that this is your Amazon order, we have cancelled your order, this is your invoice. Okay, now you would be perplexed. I didn't order anything. So you see, immediately open the invoice, and then that has the equation editor, and that probably drops a file like this. Now this is how a threat actor drops a malware and enters your computer. I hope this is very clear. I've taken a lot of time to explain it in a very, very, very simple manner. Sweet. Now, what's new with this Microsoft? What is new with this agent test? It's extremely stealthy. And I told you, right? You don't even know if it's a malicious document. It looks like a legitimate formula. If some professor probably sends it saying that this is your formula for your next experiment, obviously I would get shocked. So because that's a big formula, looks totally legit, and I would probably try to explain and see what, or experiment with it. Now that exploits the equation editor, and what does it do? Now usually the traits, when we investigate a malware case, we need to look out for these three important things. Okay, process, network callout, and Windows API. I'm going to explain all these things in very, very, very simple manner. I hope it will be useful for you people. This is what we usually monitor when we go to a crime scene. Okay, if a computer is basically infected, okay, usually when we perform investigations, if a computer is infected and they come and say that, hey, you know what, dude, the computer looks, we have a ransomware attack, we make sure that we have something called as evidence integrity. Okay, first to go to the crime scene, I first probably go to the crime scene, make sure I ask who touched the computer, till what duration somebody was using it. Okay, that's what I would probably ask, because I want to know if someone copied something or tampered with the evidence. Okay, so nobody would have tampered the evidence. They would say no, nobody tampered the evidence. Then we investigate. The key things that we look for when a malware attack basically happens, one is basically process, second is basically a network callout, which is if a domain is, if the file is talking to a domain or an IP, and what is the Windows API. I'm going to talk about all these things in a very, very detailed manner, so just bear with me. This is where we are. Now, how do we study malware? We need a trick to probably study this malware. The malware runs as fast as this, okay, very fast. And it's like babies, we cannot predict it. One time the malware can probably go straight, do a bunch of things, and next time it cannot do it. Now, how do we study? We put this malware into a boundary or a space, which is actually called as a sandbox. Now, the baby does not get out. Don't ask me, the baby will probably climb and jump. It would, okay? But still, you're still monitoring it. It's not at least as fast as this. Now, how do we monitor if the baby is going to jump? Put a CCTV camera. Now, that's what we are probably going to do. We take the sample, put the sample inside a machine, which I'm going to show you in a while, and that is not connected to the internet, and we are going to monitor it. Okay, this is how we are going to study the malware. What are we going to monitor? We're going to monitor the process, the network calls, and specifically Windows API. Okay, and if the malware probably runs inside a contained environment with no internet connection, it's actually called as a sandbox. Okay, now this happens with, now what we're going to see happens with every program. Okay, any program on Windows, we are specifically talking about only Windows malware, nothing else. Okay, now whatever happens now happens with every other computer program or any Windows program that runs. Okay, first, process, everything that runs on your Windows is basically process. Okay, now why we are talking about all these basic things is, these are the basic things that you need as a malware investigator, or the skills that you need as a malware investigator. Without this, it's very hard to perform an investigation. Okay, these are the most boring topics you'll probably ever see. I'm trying to make it the most interesting topics. I hope it's interesting, but like so far we've made it interesting. So this, just be with me for like 5 to 10 minutes, then we go to the demo. But these are the most boring concepts that we are trying to make it very, very interesting. Now, every process actually has a process ID. Okay, anything that runs on Windows will run as a process. So the process is basically like a token number. Okay, like a token number in a gym or like a locker number in a gym, like a token number. Okay. Let's go, say you go to the hospital, you get a token number. When you say the token, they identify you with the token number 245, then you put your hands up and then you return the token. That's exactly any activity that happens in Windows gets a token number, and you can track that activity with that token number. That's basically process ID. Here, any file that runs, it gets a token number. You can identify the file or the process by the process name and the token number. Now, every process gets a locker space like this in the gym. Okay. Now, each locker space has a number. What you see on the screen with the numbers are basically process ID. Okay. 29 is the process ID for that process, and the space inside the locker is actually called as the memory of the process. Okay. Now you understand every process or anything that runs in a Windows has a process ID, and that actually has a memory. So what happens in Windows is when you create a file or when you're running a Word document, it has contents inside the Word document. If you run a program, it has some variables and functions in a program. Where does it get stored? It gets stored right here. Okay. If you run a small Python program, if it uses variables, it is this process. You can identify the process with the process ID, and it has memory. Okay. Now, why we are inspecting the process ID and the process memory is, if this is a malware and if I inspect its memory, I will probably know what it is trying to run, what does it contain. That's why we always inspect process and process ID. Now the fun fact is, if this process is 30, say this is my locker, this is my friend's locker, I'm just going to ask him saying, dude, can you give me some space? I want to store some stuff inside. They will agree. So any process can communicate with other process and make use of the memory, which is the feature in Windows, but actually is the most dangerous thing that will happen in Windows, which you'll see in the next upcoming slides. Okay, cool. Now, what exactly is Windows API? How many of you watch? I think most of you would have watched MasterChef. I still watch, not the US one, but the Australia one. Now, if you're going to a cooking competition in MasterChef, okay, you want to make a dish, right? You're not expected to carry every ingredient of the dish to MasterChef. Okay. Now you'll have a paper and you write down the recipes. Okay. This is what I'm going to cook. And when you go to the competition, you refer the recipe and go to the pantry. Now that exactly is basically Windows API. Now every process or any file or any program that runs in Windows will go and say that I want to create a file, I want to move a file, I want to modify a file, I want to connect to the internet. That is written in a piece of paper, which is basically Windows API. When the malware runs or any process runs, it does not bring the code, or it is not stuffed with the code that is the functionality that it needs to connect to the internet. Instead, it tells Windows that, hey, you know what? I'm going to call the Windows API. Give me a socket. I want to connect to the internet. Give me a create file. Give me a delete file. That's basically Windows API. Okay. So, and then the next thing is the registry in Windows. You will know who came in, who came out, what is the remarks for everything. That's what is there in your Windows also. Windows registry. Windows registry forensics itself is a big topic. If you look into the registry of a Windows, you can probably find tons of interesting stuff. But that's a separate talk by itself. So that will probably take 45 to 1 hour if we probably talk about it. By just looking at the most recently used cache in registry, you can tell which program was executed when, which was executed first, and which time. So that's basically registry. Now you have a collection of everything now, right? And the last thing is network communications. Pardon me about the Q. That's a small mistake. It's like phone tapping. It's like tapping on a phone to find out what exactly is actually happening. Now we have everything together, right? You know that the process is creating a token number. Memory allocation is like a locker space. Process is memory. And then this window API is ingredients in the pantry. Registry entries are like logbooks, and network communications are like probably like Google Maps, or you're tapping on a phone. Now, if I monitor all of these things for malware, I will be able to find out what the malware is actually doing. I will know if the malware is creating a process, where is it creating, what is it doing. Second thing, I will know via this Windows API that if the malware is trying to talk to the internet, if yes, who, and where is it writing itself in the registry book. Now, these are the five important traits that we need to monitor. These are five important things we do when we perform a malware analysis. Okay, cool. Now, analyzing a malware can be of two types: static and dynamic analysis. Now, for this static analysis, this is a classic example. Instead of me going inside the store and trying everything, which is actually dynamic analysis, if I try every clothes there, and if I try to wear everything that I'm, and then see what fits for me, it's basically dynamic analysis. Okay. Now, if I just from outside look at whatever is inside it here, from outside I will see and say, okay, the collection looks good, it fits me, then probably that's basically static analysis. If you don't run the file, by just looking at the file, if you find out what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, then that's static. If you run the file and then find out what's happening with it, then it's basically dynamic analysis. This is one of a static analysis report. This is an emoted epoch. It's a malware. By just looking at these weird package names, weird variables and numbers, you can probably tell if it's a Word document from here and it's a malware. These are all variable names and declarations. By just looking at it, you can probably tell if it's a malware or not. Okay, cool. Now, why don't we execute something interesting? Okay, I'll probably show you a sample, probably see what exactly happens. There are two ways to do an analysis. Okay, one analysis by using online sandboxes, which is called as AnyRot Run, and then I have an in-house lab that I'll probably show you how we perform an analysis on these documents. Okay, so I'm just probably going to quickly show you through, and then we have some 10 slides after that, and then we have a demo. But if I probably want to show you this is actually the online. This is basically a Word document. Okay, you can probably watch it. When the Word document actually came in, this is the process tree. Now, this is what I mentioned you, right? You can look at the process tree and probably tell a story what the whole thing actually happens. If you observe here, this is the Word document, and this Word document was actually run from the temp folder. Okay, so it was downloaded in the temp folder probably from an email, and then somebody launched it. Okay, now when somebody actually launched it, it suddenly went to the command line and it actually opened a PowerShell. Now, PowerShell is a Windows utility that we use for monitoring or capabilities or to perform tasks in a faster manner. PowerShell is a utility. Okay. Now, if any file uses PowerShell, it is probably called as a lol bin, which is called living off the land binary. There is no evidence of any of these execution, but these are all stealthy executions. It's actually called as living off land binaries, lol bins we call it. Okay, now it's using a PowerShell. And next, if you observe, the PowerShell is basically running, and you see this is all base 64 encoding. Now, if I say download, upload, all these words are there, antivirus vendor will probably flag it. Your antivirus will catch it because they look for keywords. That's why they obfuscate. These are all obfuscated content. You can deobfuscate by just copying this content. Okay, just gonna copy. Hold on. I'm just gonna Oh man. Okay, 1 second. Just gonna put more info. Let's copy this and go just Google and base 64 encoding malware. Let's try to de-obfuscate it and see. Let's decode base 64 online. And we need, this is only encoded. So we remove this part. Okay. We just need what are the words it is actually doing. And let's decode it and see what actually happens. There's no, if there's an equal to sign, then it's actually padding. There is no padding. Do you see everything? This is the actual code. So you got an email with the Word document. When you got the Word document, you saw a PowerShell. We are just monitoring the process, right? When we monitored the process, we figured out that is calling a PowerShell. We copied the PowerShell and we actually put it, we found. Now, if there were keywords saying create directory, your antivirus will flag it. That's why programmatically, you see CRE is in an uppercase and lowercase. There'll be somewhere some split and join. See, it's downloading a file, which is the malware file, and it's downloading an emotet suspicious file here, and then it breaks here. So you look for these keywords for each. So these are all obfuscated. If I put this together, if you see, it'll have HTT, and then it has a WordPress file. These are all domain names that are basically split. So you'll probably find a split and join. Do you see the split here? Split and join to actually. This is the technique done by emotet threat actors to bypass antivirus engines. And if you observe, they end up downloading the malicious DLL and then they execute. All of this we are able to find out by just inspecting the process. This is how you do process investigation. And you see, this is the domain it is actually talking to. So we can block these domains. And this is called as just following the patterns through process and busting cyber criminals encoding mechanisms. Okay, now that's one way of actually doing it. So this is using just the online sandboxes. We'll probably go to our, so this is what we found, right? We found out what was the process created, name of the process, how long it ran, who was the parent process, which domain was called. We saw the domain name and we performed an investigation. Fair enough, right? Now you need to understand one important thing. When I mentioned about this locker episode, right? When I mentioned about the whole locker episode, I brought out a very interesting point. They're saying one person can probably access the locker of another person. Okay. Now that is what these malware authors take advantage of. One process's memory, another process can actually access it. So that is actually called as process injection. Okay. So this is called as code or process injection. You turn a good process into a bad process so that your antivirus do not detect you. The previous example, this is what we did, right? Microsoft Word is a trusted application. But if you observe, that was the origin for malware. So basically injecting a malicious process into a legitimate process. Okay. Now this image credits is for Brad. So he created this. A process, let's take for an example. Do you see that in our previous example, we had a DLL, which is a dynamic link library, which is like an executable. Okay. The process will look for another process and it will ask memory, copy the bad DLL and then execute. When you do the investigation, you can never see the process B. All you would probably see is the malicious process A. So your antivirus will not flag these things. This is actually the biggest advantage of process injection. Okay. Now, with the APIs, right, you will know if it opens a process, if it closes a process, then again, it allocates a memory. By just looking at the APIs or the timeline of events with the APIs, you can probably predict what exactly is happening. This is an advanced static analysis. Even without running a file, by just looking at the process, you can probably tell what exactly it was. So by just looking at these APIs, I know somebody opened a process, somebody asked for a, somebody wanted to write something inside the process, and then somebody wants to, allocate the memory inside the process, and someone executes it. By just looking at the APIs, you can tell a story. Now, is it all coming together? We inspected a process, we inspected the processes types, we inspected what happens inside the encoding, we also inspected just with the API what it actually does. Now, malwares can be heavily evasive. Okay, evasion is the act of escaping detection. Now, how? Now, I've been moving my mouse for a while, right? These online sandboxes, if you observed, will never have a mouse pointer. Okay. Now, when the machine actually starts to run, they will just remain exactly like this. Nothing will probably happen here. Okay. Now, the malware basically monitors for this mouse position. After 15 seconds, if the mouse is in the same place, and after 30 seconds, if the mouse is in the same place, the malware will never execute. It will find out that, okay, somebody is trying to fool me and study me. This is an online sandbox. I am not executing. This is an evasive detection. Now, when I meant combining the API calls, right? I can combine all the API calls, and I can probably tell if it's a malware or not, or if what exactly the file is trying to do. So one such way is to just look at the APIs of the file and probably tell if it's a remote thread injection or a side loading injection or any type of thread injection. Now, this is the last section, then we probably go to the demo. There are a lot of interesting tricks that these malware authors also follow. One such trick is what you see is called as an obfuscation. Okay. Now, these are all gibberish stuff. Okay. If I put saying set, create, delete, edit, end, your antivirus will catch all these keywords and they'll start saying, oh, this looks a little suspicious to me. Am I correct? But what these malware authors do is they put a lot of dummy content, which are all nonsense. These are all, but they use something very, very smart and strong. They do a lot of mathematical operations. They multiply characters and then they divide and subtract characters, and they'll arrive at an answer where it'll actually say character W of W keys 3. This is actually a character, which means the answer of this will actually work out to something called as 83, and they will convert the word 83 to a string, or like the text, which is actually S, the character of it. And if you observe the whole code, there will be a lot of places they will do this, which will assemble to words like HTTPS or download or those keywords. This is called as obfuscation. It's a very sneaky technique they use. Sometimes they use the properties window so that nobody sees the process actually creates. So, and then you can't see it in the taskbar. Sometimes they hide it inside variables. They hide it in a lot of interesting places. In PDF, when you get an email, sometimes they will have it inside the header or the version where this is the malicious PDF. It can actually, this will probably talk to a domain name when you open the PDF. This is another trick and the technique that these people actually follow. So they can embed inside an exe, a PDF, a Word doc. This example was a Word doc, what you see here. This example is actually a PDF. So they are basically everywhere. Okay. Now, I just want to show you a quick demo. I'm not too sure if I can show everything, but I'll probably show you the environment, what we actually do, how we actually do. So why this Windows? Okay, some error. That's the magic of VirtualBox. It runs and it does not run, and then it runs. It does not run. So, okay, we're going to do a small, interesting trick here. These are basically my sandboxes. These are my basically sandboxes. Okay, what I'm exactly doing something is very, very interesting. Both these things are not connected to the internet. Okay, if you observe, they're never connected to the internet because we're going to run malware stuff inside it, malware files inside it. Okay, this is not connected to the internet. Okay, cool. That's our setup, basic setup. So you have two machines which can only talk to each other. I'm going to run malware inside this folder. Okay, but I'm going to do a small trick here. Okay, any traffic that basically runs in this computer, any traffic that runs in this computer will be routed via this and only to this. So how am I and what am I going to do is something very interesting here. If you observe your adapter settings here that I'm doing, if I go to TCP IP4, usually you'll have Google DNS saying 8.8.8.8. Okay, but instead my IP address, sorry, for this machine is 172.16.136. I've put my gateway and my DNS as the same address. So anything that happens here, okay, if you ask who's facebook.com, this machine will respond, not your Google. So that we are fooling the malware saying that you are talking to the internet, but you're actually not talking to the internet. So you have isolated a lab and you're performing malware analysis and also fooling the malware. Now, how does this work? This is a small interesting setting that we follow. There's a small Python, this is a small Python program called fake DNS. Okay. Now what it does is, as I told you, right, the DNS for this machine is actually this machine only. Now if I go to the internet and I probably type batman.com. Okay, this machine actually should reply IEDD speaking. Okay, let's see. Batman.com. Okay, ideally this machine should respond, but it is not responding. We'll figure out why. Let's see. This is TCP IP4. The IP address, the IP address of this machine should be if config 136 172.16. There we go. Made a mistake. It's 172 should be 76 and this should be 76. This should be 76. Now it should work. Let's give it a shot. There we go. Okay, now it should actually work. So we good. Close. I want to close this. Now let's go ahead and say, dude, I am Batman. Everybody's going to believe me. Now if I type iambatman.com, you'll see that this is iambatman.com. So any traffic that runs from this computer will be monitored and processed by this computer. Okay, that's the purpose of fake DNS. So when the malware runs, and if it's talking to the internet from here, you're probably going to capture all the traffic that runs from here to here actually. Okay, now that's the purpose of fake DNS. This is how a lab setup should be. Okay, now let's take so the example that you're probably going to look, since we don't have much time, is I have a PDF malware. Okay, this is basically a PDF malware. Now, without inspecting this PDF malware, without running the malware, you can inspect a malware in several ways. One such tool is actually called as PDF, PPDF. Okay, and then you give the file name as FA, whatever it is. It's going to tell you that the malware is having a hash value of like this. Okay, that's one. And then it's probably going to say that these are the streams and the objects. Now in PDF, everything is basically an object and a stream. So it's going to saying that it's got JavaScript, it's got embedded files, which means this PDF can drop a Word document also. So this is one way of analyzing, do it. Static analysis. If you want to analyze it dynamically, let's go to this let's go to this Word document. Okay, you'll see a Word document here. Now, if I run let's keep running fake, let's keep running fake DNS here. Okay, we can still see when it runs. Okay, now if I enable this macro, okay, if I want to enable this macro, then it's going to infect my computer. But any infection that happens in my computer or any domain name, this will probably be caught here. Now to do a dynamic analysis, this is what I was actually talking about. You go to options, you go to customize triple, then you can actually select developer, and then you can press OK. Now here you can view the document in a Visual Basic Editor. Okay, now this is what I was actually talking about, the forms and these action windows. If you see here, there are a lot of elements that are hidden inside it. If you observe, this is what I showed you. The P will be converted into a character. Do you see these things? These are all hiding inside this. So these will all be assembled at a later point of time. And when you, let's say when you enable and execute the malware, in this case, you will be able to see the malware probably talking here. If it makes a query in the future, you'll be able to see this. Now this malware is actually running, and one by one it will take some time and it'll probably start talking. Do you see this? rickwelder.com, sitecgps.com. These are all paulburkiphotography.com. All of this is what the malware is actually trying to talk to. Then it will end up downloading a new file and doing these things. So this is how you statically, without running anything, analyze a piece of code. And this is how you dynamically analyze something and then perform an analysis. So this is how you bust the tricks of an attacker. Another way of doing this whole process is you can probably go here, view the code. Okay, this is what the obfuscated code. You can't, if you take a paper and a pencil to solve this crime, or add a print statement here for this function and get the answer also. That's another way of doing it. And these are the domains that's probably being updated and doing something. So this is a dynamic analysis of building a small lab, allowing the malware to execute, but catching where all it talks to. You can block all these domains and find out from the internet what these domains are basically doing. Okay, now that's the basic difference between a static and a dynamic analysis. And these are the techniques, tricks, what these malware authors basically follow. So I showed you a live demo. So that's all I have. These are the state-sponsored actors. This is how malware authors operate. These are the techniques, the basics that you need to do to solve these malware crimes. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was not boring. I know it's a very dry subject, but let me know what you think about the talk. So I'm up for questions.
It was indeed interesting, sir. So yeah, now we can have the questions. So
Sure.
we have one in the, yeah. Ambu Karthik says it was brilliant. So
Thank you.
yeah, so all the participants, if you have any queries, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can leave your questions in the chat box too.
You can ask about your career skills. What should you need to do to be here? So, oh, thank God, somebody's sleep actually ran away. So thank you so much. Yeah, that's a compliment. Thank you. These are all very tough and very boring. The most boring topics you would never want to listen at after lunch. So I try to make it very, very simple and interesting. This is how I learned, basically, being a last bench student, which was several years back. I think it's been 14 and a half years since I finished college. So it's been long days. So I learned it this way, fun and interesting wherever I go. This is how I love to learn. So these are the basics that you need to understand to become an investigator. And being an investigator is easy. So, okay, somebody actually asked me a question saying, can ECE students do? If you I'll be quite honest with you. ECE students are the most brilliant coders I've actually met. Triple E and ECE students. Anybody can take up this profession. Anybody can do it. So this is pretty interesting. So how do you start with malware analysis? There's a book called Practical Malware Analysis. Okay. So I'm just going to put it in the chat. Practical Malware Analysis. So that's a brilliant book. Just start reading it and it gives you an amazing opening. You need a little bit of assembly language. You can pick it up on the way. I didn't show these things. It will be overwhelming if I show assembly language and all of these things to you. So that's why I didn't show you these things. So yeah, that's the way to probably start. It's a very interesting profession. And is there any piece of code we can make that can detect the piece of malware? See, antivirus is basically the one that detects the malwares, but you can build detection engines on your node to detect these malwares. That's why they have something called as proxy, interception of traffic, firewalls, antivirus vendors. And all of this is now put together called as next generation firewall. It's totally different today. So you can do amazing final year projects or third year projects with this malware analysis. It's a very interesting topic. It's a very open topic for research. You can bring in a lot of thermodynamics into it. If you read my Google, you just Google my name, you can see my articles, my talks. I would have given an interview for ZDNet where I talk about how we use entropy, Shannon's entropy theory, to tackle malware. So it's a very interesting topic. You can probably read about me if you Google. So can we identify a file as a malware even before we execute it? Yes, that's what we did, right? In static analysis, when we take the file, sometimes by just looking at the email, where it comes from, you can tell if it's a malware file or not. The next thing is you can probably perform a static analysis to find out if it's a malware or not. That's the whole thing. Okay, practical question. What should we do to avoid such Word documents? So see, what happens with this, never trust any email. Just read through it. See if it is meant for you. Okay. See if it's actually meant for you. Is it coming from an authentic source? Because, um, you know, uh, see what happens with it. See if you know the person, why are they mailing you? If you have a suspicious feeling, just take the document and detonate it somewhere. Upload it into something called as virustotal.com. Okay, and see if it's a malicious file or not. You can upload files there. The only way to prevent is being safe, because that's why these macros are disabled by default, because attackers are basically reusing and using the techniques that are legitimate applications in Windows and in Linux. So these are built to serve a purpose which was actually misused. So you have to be, user awareness is the biggest thing for these things. Programmatically you cannot do much because these are all features inside Windows. So you have to be careful. Don't open anything that you don't know. And that's the only way you can. So how do I get started with X86 assembly? I think there's a wonderful tutorial by somebody called Malware Unicorn. So he has a brilliant X86. You need not know everything about X86 assembly. You need to know about registers. You should be able to spot loops, jumps, far jumps, and all those things. You need to understand what's going inside that circuit. That's all you need to know. You need not know even I don't know the end-to-end assembly level language. If you give me a malware code, I'll probably try to tell you that what is the assembly trying to do, where is the jump taking it. I can put breakpoints, I can see inside the memory, and all of these things I can probably do. So that's what you need to know. Okay. I've heard. Okay, not too many questions. Brilliant questions. Okay. DNS is basically domain name. Proxy is something different where the route is different from a normal route. But the DNS, both basically work on IP address. DNS is nothing but a name to IP, IP to name. Proxy is a whole different concept. But the base for everything is domain name and IP address. That's the answer for Ishan. So I've heard it before that Linux is much safer than Windows. Well, I won't agree. See, the point why Windows is exploited more is because the footprint of Windows is actually more. I mean, in petrol pumps, in hotels, everywhere, Windows is more, and it's easy for them to breach it. Linux is safe, but it's not entirely safe. You've had Linux ransomwares, you've had Linux malwares, Mac malwares. The reason is the number of user base is more in Windows and it's very commercial. And it makes it easy for the attackers to steal data and compromise people. That's why you'll see a lot of Windows being. And Linux is obviously safe because the inter-process communication, the process thread communication is totally different from Windows, where we saw in Windows that any process can talk to another process's memory, which is risky. So architecturally, fundamentally, yes, it is sort of safe. Okay, why do we prefer static analysis? So static analysis is a very smarter way of analyzing, right? You get thousands of malwares, you cannot do dynamic analysis for everything. By just doing static analysis, you can quickly say that, you know what, I think this is a malware, is flag it. It gives you enough indicators by just looking at the API calls and the strings or the output. Whereas dynamic is more of an expensive process. Now I showed you the machine. I have to clean, I have to restore a snapshot for the machine to get a new malware in and do it. So it's a time consuming process. You can opt whatever you want for convenience, but if you're probably going to the court, if you're going for a government level of malware, then you need to have a solid screenshot evidence of both static and dynamic analysis. So that's two things. Please explain pirated sites. Well, pirated sites are pirated sites that you're not supposed to go. Don't download anything from that, because mostly they're all Trojans. If you have a free Office 365 crack, that can be a Trojan, which can do a process injection that we saw. It will look legitimate, then definitely it will, then definitely it will infect you. So refrain from downloading any, from download sites. Are there any good sources for pen testing? There's something called as Pen Tester Academy. That site is very good. You can probably go to that site. If you probably want a free books, I mean, the art of penetration testing guide. There's something called as Hackers Playbook. You can read that book. The Hackers Playbook is brilliant. You should probably read it. Hackers Playbook. I'll type it. That's a good book. So that you can read. Okay, what's that? Since there are sorry, so definitely malware that escape detections. How would you would the malware code writer write such code? And is there any one way to look for? See, there are a lot of patterns. We write a lot of regex patterns to detect these malwares. But the problem with this, we can detect it, but it evolves over a period of time. Every week, a new pattern comes. The malware author tends to evade so many times, tends to do smart things so many times. It's a cat and mouse game. One time he wins, one time we win. One time he loses, one time I win, and it's so on. So we keep patterns and detecting it. So in a faster manner. But they outrun us. We again outrun them. It's a race that keeps going on. You can look at static analysis patterns and execution patterns and build a regex table so that you can spot the patterns in the malware. I hope that answers your question. Never download movies from torrent sites. Never. Okay, the movies can have malicious subtitles. Sorry. Never download stuff from torrent sites. It's absolute waste to do it. Pay, man, it's like $400. Two of your friends go buy Netflix subscription, 300 rupees per month, and happily watch it. Why you download from torrent sites? Or three people pool together to buy Netflix subscription, 200 rupees per month. So don't download from torrent sites. It's risky. Which form of malware analysis involves observing the behavior? Dynamic analysis allows you to form the behavior of the malwares. That's what I said, right? I would run the malware, observe the process, observe the system, see what it is doing, go to the registry, do registry forensics, look for cache, look for loader. So that dynamic analysis allows you to give this flexibility, amazing flexibility. If you want to do machine learning, to stop malwares, incoming malwares of same patterns, then you probably need to have a good dynamic analysis. And good dynamic analysis will probably, everybody has to do dynamic analysis, but not always when it demands. So if you want to observe the best behavior of the malware and where it does, your dynamic analysis is the biggest plus point to do it. Nice questions. Interesting questions. Is that all? Do we have more questions? Anybody else want to ask? Wow, I'm starting at Cisco at next week. Good. Welcome, dude. Welcome to Cisco. Any tips to get to the security part? You can come and ping me, dude. Just Google for me. Or you can find me in LinkedIn, guys. I'll give you my LinkedIn profile. If you have any other career questions, you can shoot your LinkedIn questions to me. You can ping me. So let me find my LinkedIn profile. Let's see. So if you come to Cisco start, you can start for now. Then we'll see. I can see if I can catch hold of you and we can. Yeah, this is my LinkedIn profile. You can add me. I'm also there in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. So you can just go get hold of me. What's the career in malware analysis? It's a very interesting career. There are certifications like GREM from SANS, which is very expensive. And this will give you a full length of malware analyst. There is malware, memory forensics. You take the memory snapshot of a computer and then you parse the memory for archives and stuff. That's a brilliant career also. So the career is amazing. The talent pool is very less, but we need people who do this memory forensics and malware. It's a brilliant career. So my day-to-day job probably involves in taking malware samples like this, analyzing it, building with detection methodologies so that our customers are safe. Or sometimes when a customer is hacked or if they get breached, then we go and do a post-mortem investigation in a crime scene. That's the job that I do. So it's a very interesting profession. So you can explore it. It's a very interesting. You can become a malware analyst. You can become an incident response analyst. There are a lot of career. There's something called as GIAC also in SANS. You can take a look at that also. Is that all? Or do we have any further questions or can we wind up? Sakshi, you take the call.
Yes, sir. There's one more question.
Okay. Oh, we
Two
just
more actually.
plethora of questions we have. Like nice. Um, okay, right now I'm not preparing for my. No, you're not preparing right now. You're preparing. Okay, preparing for your CEH. What should I opt for next? So CEH is a good base for you. Then you can probably read the practical malware analysis book. Then you can probably slowly start playing with samples. Contact me if you have any doubts. Then slowly you should move by publishing blogs, giving a talk so that the world knows that you're a malware analyst. Then you take an interview. We'll see where you can fit you into. Then if you're good for the job, we get you the job. So that's your next step. Read practical malware analysis after your CEH and then keep reading advanced malware analysis and then slowly start reversing samples, doing samples. That's the way to go about. And between penetration testing, which one do you think is enjoyable? So I was doing pen testing for 2, 3, 4 years, but I didn't. I mean, it's like the same step of same kind of stuff you keep doing, like, and then you do bug bounty, make money. But I didn't find it interesting. I found malware analyst more interesting because I keep learning every day. Whatever I learn, 5 days later gets outdated. I need to learn a lot, surf a lot. I find malware analysis more enjoyable. It's more challenging for a person who's my character. I love challenges, and it's like a Sherlock Holmes. It's a thinking game each time you go into it. So I like doing this. So malware analysis is my cup of tea.
I guess all of the doubts have been cleared. So if you, yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, there'll be a feedback form that will be sent in the chat box. I request all the participants to fill that.
Okay. You
Yes,
can
sir.
say if it is
So,
good, bad, was waste of your time, whatever you want to say, you can say. So
no, sir, it was indeed very informative. So personally, I was new to this topic and I got to learn so much. And definitely after this session also, I'll be looking into different concepts. So yeah, thank you so much for investing your time by educating us about this.
thank you.
And as a token of appreciation and gratitude, we have something for you. I request Rashi to present it.
Thank you. That's
Thank you so
the
much.
that's the E way of giving a memento. That's nice. So thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you again. It was really amazing to hear from you. And thank you, all of you, for joining the session. And I hope everybody have been educated by this event. Thank you all. We can wind up now, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe, guys. Thank you so much for attending.